Everyone in high society whispered of Isla Munro and Evan Wycliffe as if they were a myth come to life. From the marble-clad ballrooms of London to the gilded yachts in Monaco, their union symbolized power, wealth, and an unspoken promise of legacy. At 28, Isla, daughter of an esteemed financier, was radiant in every photograph. Her dark hair swept into effortless waves, eyes the color of storm-swept seas, and a smile that both enchanted and disarmed. Evan, heir to the Wycliffe Empire, towered beside her, a model of aristocratic poise in tailored suits, his cool gaze hinting at a world of ambitions only he could see. Tonight, under a chandelier of crystal droplets and the soft strains of a string quartet, the two stood at the center of an opulent garden party thrown by Evan's family. Guests clustered around them like moths to flame, royalty, CEOs, even influencers flown in for the spectacle. Glasses clinked. Champagne bubbled like captured stardust. Isla laughed as Evan leaned in, whispering a joke only she could understand. In that moment, cameras flashed, and the world believed in fairy tales again. "Darling," Evan murmured, adjusting the diamond pin at Isla's shoulder. "You light up every room better than any chandelier." Isla brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "And you make every moment feel like destiny. Promise me we'll always be this golden." He smiled, soft enough to be genuine. Always. Yet behind the glimmer, a flicker of something else lurked in Evan's eyes. Restlessness. Perhaps a thrill of what could come next. Nobody noticed. The guests raised toasts. To the future. To the perfect pair. Social media exploded as influencers tagged the moment #MunroWycliffe. But fame is a double-edged sword. For every adoration, there was envy. For every cheer, a hidden malice. Later, as the orchestra struck its final chord, Isla and Evan drifted to the balcony overlooking a sea of lanterns. Below, servers in crisp uniforms navigated trays of truffles and caviar. Fireworks were scheduled to burst in 3 minutes, a promise of spectacle that matched the couple's radiance. Isla rested her head against Evan's shoulder. "This feels like our story's happiest chapter yet." He kissed her temple, but his eyes fixed on something beyond, a distant horizon, perhaps a new thrill. But every story needs conflict, if only to make the triumph sweeter. "What could possibly go wrong?" she teased, turning to face him. The lights from the garden flickered across his chiseled features, and for the briefest instant, he looked elsewhere. She laughed it off. "Don't spoil the moment with riddles." He let her head rest again, offering the illusion of comfort, but as the first burst of emerald and gold lit the sky, painting Isla's face in unnatural hues, Evan's expression remained unreadable, and in the hush between fireworks, a single thought echoed in his mind. How far can this story go? The crowd cheered. Phones recorded. Champagne flowed. Love, they believed, was eternal. But every flame cast a shadow, and tonight, beneath the dazzling display, a darker play was already unfolding. The morning after the garden party held the world in its thrall. Headline screamed, "Munro plus Wycliffe, engagement of the century." Isla awoke to a flood of messages, glittering screenshots of congratulatory texts, social media tags, and selfie videos from starstruck onlookers at yesterday's gala. Yet as her maid adjusted the silk sheets on the four-poster bed, Isla felt a curious ache behind her smile, as if celebration had come too quickly. Within hours, the Munro and Wycliffe families convened at the Wycliffe ancestral estate, an imposing Georgian mansion overlooking rolling green hills. Every corridor whispered history, ancestral portraits, gilded mirrors, and priceless tapestries. Isla's heels clicked against marble floors as she made her way to the grand hall, her gown trailing in soft waves. Evan emerged from the mahogany doors, slate-gray suit immaculate, cufflinks catching the morning sun. He offered his arm, and Isla, buoyed by excitement, took it. Guests lined the red carpet aisle, dignitaries, industrial magnates, and a carefully curated selection of social elites. A hush fell as they approached the dais. At the center, perched on a dais carved with family crests, the officiant, a distinguished judge, awaited, his robes as solemn as the moment demanded. 2 ivory pillars flanked him, draped in white roses. Crystal chandeliers glinted overhead, and pale sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the couple in kaleidoscopic light. Isla swallowed past a sudden tremor. Turning to Evan, she read his reassuring smile. Yet beneath his calm, his eyes darted to the assembled guests, an unreadable sparkle. He cleared his throat. "Friends and family," he began, voice resonant. "We gather today to celebrate love's promise." The officiant nodded, calling them to repeat vows. Isla's heart pounded as she recited familiar words. "I, Isla Monroe, take you, Evan Wycliffe." Then Evan echoed, "I, Evan Wycliffe, take you, Isla Monroe." A collective sigh followed, and the officiant pronounced, "I now present to you engaged." Except he didn't. Instead, Evan leaned into the microphone, his warm tone slipping into chilly steel. "I don't." Gasps rippled through the hall. Flowers quivered. Cameras whirled. Isla froze, the next words stabbing like ice. "I'm ending this engagement. Isla, I never loved you. You're not good enough for the Wycliffe name." Stifled sobs rose as Isla's face blanched. Mourning veils would have been more dignified than the stunned silence that fell. Her trembling voice barely whispered, "Evan." He uncoupled his arm, stepping back. "I had to show everyone," a cruel smile, "that merit matters more than title." Laughter bubbled from a few tables, sharp as broken glass. A cousin raised a glass in mock salute. Journalists scrambled for angles. Influencers live-streamed her devastation. In seconds, Isla became spectacle. Despair collided with rage. She forced her knees to hold her weight. "But we planned a life together." He shrugged. "Plans change." He swept past her, leaving her alone at the altar of humiliation. The floral arch behind her seemed to mock the moment. Whispers turned to shouts. Ants dabbed tears with lace handkerchiefs. Chairs scraped. Someone whispered. She fell from grace faster than you could tweet. Security moved in, escorting Isla backward. Her gown caught on the dais steps. She stumbled. A photographer snapped a red carpet shot of her face, eyes wide, mouth agape, a portrait of public betrayal. As she passed the exit doors, she glimpsed Evan through the archway, poised, unaffected, already rehearsing his next soundbite. Behind him, guests erupted into rushed applause, some cheering the spectacle. Outside, a lone limousine idled, its door open. Isla stumbled forward, breathless, tears streaming. She didn't glance back. Above her, the stained glass windows glinted in morning light, cold and different. And in that frozen moment, she vowed, never again. The footage replayed 1,000 times before the day was done. Clips of Isla's shattered smile and Evan's smug declaration flooded every screen. Television, tablet, smartphone. Microphone gate, they called it. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Wycliffe wipeout. Hashtag engagement fail. Hashtag Isla strong. Isla lay curled in the backseat of her car, muffled sobs mixing with the hum of the engine. Her champagne-colored gown lay crumpled on the seat beside her, a cruel reminder of the fairy tale that turned nightmare. "Miss Monroe," whispered her assistant Mia, pressing a silk handkerchief into Isla's grasp. Mia's eyes were red but determined. "We need to get you somewhere safe." Isla gleamed with tears as she nodded. "Drive. Anywhere far from cameras." The driver navigated winding lanes until the car emerged onto a secluded country road. Rolling fields stretched into misty distance. Here, privacy still held. Mia dialed a friend at Scotland's Lockview Bakery, a cozy hideaway owned by a discreet benefactress. "They'll take her in," Mia promised. At dusk, they arrived at a stone cottage tucked beneath pines. Warm light escaped through mullioned windows. Inside, shelves were heavy with freshly baked bread and pastries, and the aroma of cinnamon mingled with peat smoke. A woman with silver hair and keen eyes, Vivian Blackstone, greeted them. "Isla Monroe." Vivian's voice was gentle yet firm. "I've been expecting you." "Who sent you?" Isla managed to whisper, voice cracked. Vivian smiled kindly. "Someone who believes your story isn't over." She led Isla to a small room overlooking the bakery's sunflower garden. "Rest here. Tomorrow we begin anew." Isla sank onto a linen-covered bed, exhaustion overtaking heartbreak. Outside, she heard the distant call of cuckoos, a lullaby of promise. She drifted into uneasy sleep. The next morning, sunlight spilled across handmade quilts. Vivian served porridge and fresh berries. "Tell me everything," she encouraged. Over breakfast, Isla recounted each damning detail. The glint in Evan's eye as he spoke betrayal, the cold hush that followed, the camera flashes capturing her tears. Vivian nodded thoughtfully. "He underestimated you. Public shame can break many, but it can also forge legends." Isla hesitated. "Legends?" Vivian's gaze sharpened. "Yes. You have two choices. Fade into oblivion or rise from these ashes. Scotland may be quiet, but power can be built in silence." In the days that followed, Vivian introduced Isla to life beyond the limelight. Early mornings kneading dough, afternoons poring over financial ledgers, evenings studying strategy. Isla felt a hunger she'd never known: knowledge, purpose, self-worth. Each task chipped away at her despair. Late one night, Vivian took Isla to a window overlooking the loch. "Your mother's past did more than you know," she confessed. "Family ties, dormant trusts, forgotten estates. We'll uncover them." Isla stared at the dark water. "You think I can fight back?" Vivian placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "I know you will. And when you return, they won't see you coming." Isla closed her eyes, breathing in Scottish heather. Around her, the world of betrayal felt distant. Here, she was just Isla. Broken, yes, but unbowed. The road ahead would demand every ounce of strength. But as dawn broke over the misty loch, she felt something spark within her. The first glimmer of vengeance, and the promise of a comeback no one would forget. Back in London, the world raced ahead while Isla transformed across the sea. That fateful evening's footage had been uploaded to every platform. YouTube's top trending, TikTok looped in seconds, Instagram stories flooded with reaction gifs. The clip lasted just 33 seconds, from Evan's cruel pronouncement to Isla's stunned retreat. Yet in that brief span, millions watched, shared, and reshaped the narrative. Analyst Emily Sands sniffed at her morning coffee. "Remarkable," she mused, scrolling through engagement metrics. 33 seconds of meltdown generated more revenue than any ad campaign this quarter. Financial tickers on her screen reported Wycliffe Enterprises shares dipping by 5%. Investors jittery over brand reputation. "He's bleeding equity," Emily whispered. Hashtag Wycliffe Wipeout wasn't just a meme. It was a market-moving tsunami. Meanwhile, in a cramped flat above a kebab shop, content creator J. Dub Wallace grinned at his monitor. He'd chopped the engagement's dramatic arc into 15-second teasers and layered them with suspenseful music. "She never saw it coming," he crooned on his mic, fingers dancing over keys. "Wait for the mic slip." His video hit 3 million views in 4 hours. "She's the new queen of tragedy," Jay told his followers. Every retweet, every comment fed the algorithm. In 7 minutes flat, Isla's downfall became pop culture currency. On the other side of the screen, Isla pored over her phone in Scotland. Mia, vigilant and loyal, forwarded every trending clip. "Look," Mia said softly, pointing to Isla's own face in viral reaction memes. "People think you're a joke." Isla's jaw tightened. "Let them laugh." She scrolled further, discovering fan pages dedicated to the humiliated fiancé. Some showed sympathy, others ruthlessly mocked. Yet buried in the vitriol were notes of encouragement. "You'll rise again. Evan messed up. Support Isla." Small green shoots of solidarity amidst a forest of ridicule. Vivian joined her at the breakfast table, offering a tray of buttery scones. "You see how fast the world moves," she said. "In online time, 7 minutes is eternity." She tapped the screen, showing live engagement graphs. "But you choose the narrative now." Isla met Vivian's gaze. "I want them to know my side. To fear me rather than pity me." Vivian nodded approvingly. "First, we build your arsenal. Legal, financial, strategic. Then we unleash your story, on your terms." Meanwhile, in the Wycliffe boardroom back in London, directors whispered behind polished oak panels. A crisis meeting had been called. Evan sat at the head, face drained of color. His father's portrait loomed above. "This is unacceptable," barked the chairman. "Our brand is toast." Your reckless stunt cost us millions. Evan clenched his fists. Give me a chance to fix it. Fix it, the chairman scoffed. You started a wildfire. Now contain it. Inside the cold room, every eye tracked Evan's tense shoulders. They saw not an engaged fiancé, but a liability. Outside, Twitter storms howled. News alerts buzzed. Isla Monroe's transformation was underway, and every second ticked down to a dramatic comeback no one saw coming. The security guards moved with robotic precision. In their dark suits and earpieces, they flanked Isla as she stumbled down the gravel drive of Wycliffe Estate. Her dress, once flawless, was now streaked with mud, the hem snagged on ornate urns. Cameras clicked mercilessly. Reporters jostled for a shot. Miss Monroe, any comment? One shouted. Evan ruined you. How do you feel? Isla lifted her chin, mud-splattered but unbowed. I feel free, she said, voice low yet unwavering. The words rippled through the crowd. Free, from expectation, from betrayal, from a life not her own. She passed the grand gates, marble pillars looming like sentinels. Behind her, the estate receded, a kingdom lost. Ahead, a black limousine idled, its driver waiting. Mia slid into the back seat beside her. You okay? She whispered, handing over bottled water. Isla accepted it, feeling the cool plastic against her palm. Better than ever. She exhaled, letting the limousine doors close out the chaos. Inside, the car's leather seats smelled faintly of burning tobacco and stale perfume. The driver navigated London streets with silent efficiency. The city's buzz seemed distant now, like a forgotten symphony. Isla watched rain trace rivulets down the window, smearing neon reflections. Mia scrolled through the latest updates. They say you were escorted by guards to protect you. They spun it as concern. Isla laughed, a short, sharp sound. Protect me from what? The truth. Mia shook her head. No, from reality. But reality is exactly where you belong. She paused. Where will you go? Isla set down the water. To rebuild. Away from their world. Mia's expression flickered. Scotland. Isla smiled. Yes. Vivian's place. I need to learn how to survive on my own terms. Minutes passed in silence. Then Mia said quietly, Your phone. There's a call from your mother. Isla's chest tightened. She hadn't spoken to her mother since the engagement announcement. Put her through. The driver tapped the speaker. Isla swallowed. Mama. Her mother's voice trembled. My darling, I saw it all. I'm so. Don't. Isla interrupted gently. You shouldn't have called. She paused, hearing her mother's stifled sob. Tell Papa I'll be fine. I love you. I love you too. The line clicked dead. Isla set the phone aside. Enough tears. Outside, the limousine slowed. A familiar sign appeared, Lockview Bakery, nestled among heather and pines. Warm lights glowed in the dusk. Birds circled overhead as if welcoming her home. The driver opened the door. Isla stepped into cool air scented with pine and peat. Vivian emerged from the doorway, arms open. Welcome back, she said with a soft smile. Isla hugged her. Feels strange to be saved by bread and kindness. Vivian chuckled. Bread builds empires, and kindness steals the heart. Inside, a fire crackled. The scent of fresh pastries drifted through wooden rafters. Vivian poured tea as Mia admired the quaint decor. Isla sank into a high-backed chair, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. Vivian placed a leather-bound ledger on the table. Your first lesson, know your assets. This belonged to your grandfather. Isla opened the book, eyes widening at faded entries. Land deeds, trust funds, financial notes. Evidence of legacy she never knew she had. He left this for me. Vivian nodded. It's how we begin. Isla closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The world of betrayal lay behind her. Ahead stretched a path of reinvention. As the wind whispered through the pines, she felt a fierce determination take root. They thought they'd broken her, and in that miscalculation, they'd unleashed something far more formidable. Tonight, Isla Monroe was not just a fallen fiancée. She was a phoenix on the brink of rising. Isla woke before dawn, the low Scottish sun barely cresting the hills, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe last night's nightmares were over. But Mia's urgent knock shattered the fragile calm. In the candlelit study, Isla found her assistant rifling through a leather portfolio. "I need you to see this," Mia said, her voice tight. She slid a glossy photograph and a folded note across the table. On the photograph, Evan lounged at a private gentleman's club, smug beneath crystal chandeliers, flanked by 3 laughing cousins. In his hand gleamed a fistful of poker chips, and the winning one was made of plastic. "Explain," Isla demanded, voice cold. Mia unfolded the note. In neat cursive, one cousin had bet Evan he couldn't disgrace Isla in front of 500 high society guests. A second wagered that he couldn't reduce her to tears on film. Evan's own handwriting at the bottom read, "I'll take that bet, watch me." No context, no remorse, only that chilling signature. Isla's stomach churned, her vision blurred. "He toyed with you," Mia said softly. "This was never about love. It was a sick game." Isla paced the study. The crackle of the peat fire echoed her racing heartbeat. Memories of the engagement party, Evan's grin as he raised the mic, the hush before his words, her world crumbling, collided with this new betrayal. "He gambled on my humiliation," she whispered, with family by his side. Mia watched her, sympathy in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Isla. But now you know the truth. Knowledge is power, some say." Isla clenched her fists. Betrayal cut deep, but rage was a fuel she could harness. "We'll use it," she said. "All of it." She turned back to the portfolio, finding legal documents hinting at a dormant trust. "My mother's name appears here, in a trust linked to Wycliffe Estates." Mia's brow lifted. "Your mother?" She had ties to their fortune. Isla's breath caught. The betrayal stung, but beneath it lay an opportunity they had never expected. A half-forgotten legacy, a slumbering claim that could shift the entire balance of power. "I need every scrap of information on that trust," she instructed, "and I need to know how to activate it." On the horizon, the Scottish dawn broke golden across the loch. Light danced on the water like promise. Isla slipped into her coat. "Action," she declared. "Not revenge, strategy." Mia followed her out into the crisp air. "What's our first move?" Isla paused at the garden gate, wind tugging at her hair. "Call Vivian," she said, voice steady. "We begin by reclaiming what they stole, and then we take everything they thought they owned." As they strode toward the bakery cottage, Isla felt a grim exhilaration. Betrayal had been the final blow, but from these ashes, she would forge a power they would never see coming. And somewhere, far below the surface of luxury and privilege, Evan's empire had just ignited a war he couldn't win. For 3 days, the world tried to find Isla Monroe, and found emptiness. Every social feed, every tabloid's front page, every desperate search query led to dead ends. Her Instagram account was disabled. Her Twitter handle produced only an automated apology. Her family home in London stood silent, lights off. Friends called endlessly. Journalists camped outside vacated addresses. Each time they rang, they heard only a recorded message. "Isla Monroe is unavailable at this time. Please leave a message." Late one night, Mia checked the phones again and found nothing but voicemail after voicemail. "They'll stop soon," she reassured herself, though unease gnawed at her. "They'll move on to the next scandal." Meanwhile, in the Scottish Highlands, Isla lived in crisp anonymity. Vivian Blackstone's cottage had no Wi-Fi. Phone signals wavered like ghosts. The nearest village was 15 miles away. Here, there were no flashing cameras or viral clips. Only peat fires and sheep, the wind in the pines, and the distant cry of gulls. Isla learned to savor the quiet. Mornings spent chopping wood, nights reading by lamplight, the steady rhythm of kneading dough at the bakery. One afternoon, as she rolled pastry, a neighbor, an elderly woman named Fiona, paused at the kitchen door. "You're quiet today," Fiona observed, her thick accent gentle. "Homesick?" Isla offered a small smile. "No, this feels right." Fiona chuckled. "You found peace in strange places, but sometimes silence is a weapon." Isla paused, flour-dusted hands resting on the table. I'm learning that. When the bakery closed, Isla walked the heath, the wind tugging her coat. She passed a rusty mailbox, paused, and pressed her ear to its door. Empty. No letters. No queries. Just stillness. Back in London, reporters clattered keyboards, crafting headlines. Where's Isla Monroe? And fiancé vanishes. Foul play suspected? But without footprints to follow, every lead fizzled. That evening, as wildfire headlines cooled into rumor, Mia appeared at the cottage door, carrying a single envelope. No return address. With trembling fingers, Isla slid it open. Inside was a printed photograph, a black-and-white image of her as a child, laughing in her mother's arms. Tucked beneath was a note in Vivian's handwriting. Silence is your sanctuary. When you emerge, you'll be ready. Isla studied the photograph. It captured the innocence she feared she'd lost. Her mother's arm seemed to cradle not just a child, but a promise of redemption. She remembers me, Isla whispered. She believes in me. Closing the door against the gathering dusk, Isla placed the photo on the mantel above the hearth. The firelight flickered across the edges of the frame, as if illuminating a path forward. Radio silence was working in her favor. Rumors died, attention waned, and she reclaimed her own narrative in the quiet. As midnight approached, Isla sat by the window, penning a letter to Vivian. I'm ready. The ink glowed black in the lantern light. Outside, the wind carried the first snow flurry of autumn, dusting heather in silver. Tomorrow, the real journey would begin, and when the world woke to Isla Monroe's return, they would find someone they never expected. Each morning at dawn, Isla donned a simple apron and headed to Lockview Bakery before the village stirred. The scent of hearth bread and yeast greeted her like an old friend. Flour clung to her hair and hands. The rhythmic slap of dough under her fingers grounded her in the present. With every loaf she shaped, she felt her old self, delicate, privileged, melt away, replaced by something sturdier, resilience. "Mornin', Isla," called Owen, the bakery's head baker, as she arrived. He handed her a bowl of batter. "Ready for today's special?" She dipped her hands in, kneading with purpose. "Yes, show me the ropes." By mid-morning, delivery baskets brimmed with warm scones, croissants, and fruit tarts bound for local shops and the tiny tea room by Lockview Pier. Villagers tipped their fishermen's hats and smiled in greetings, unaware of her former life. Here, she was simply Miss Monroe, the helpful baker's assistant. After closing, Isla retreated to a rented cottage across the garden. Its stone walls sheltered her, but at night she lit candles and pored over textbooks borrowed from a local tutor, finance, estate law, corporate governance. The pages blurred as exhaustion mounted, yet she pressed on. Knowledge was her new currency. One evening, Mia arrived with news. Wycliffe Enterprises had stalled. Shares plunged. A hostile takeover was rumored. Evan's public meltdown and ensuing silence had ignited investor panic. Isla's stomach tightened with triumph. "He didn't think this far ahead," she murmured. "Amateur." Mia offered a folder. "I collected these filings for you to review." Inside lay balance sheets and shareholder lists, red flag debts, and obscure trusts. Isla scanned the documents, heart racing. Lines of numbers began to tell a story. Vulnerability, mismanagement, opportunity. A world away from kneading dough. But every loaf and every ledger now felt part of the same alchemy, transformation. Next day at the bakery, Isla greeted Fiona. "Have you ever thought of investing in property here?" she asked, balancing a tray of cinnamon buns. The old woman raised a brow. "My cottage has been in my family for 3 generations." "Why?" Isla smiled, offering a bun. "Just curious." It was practice. Small talk turned reconnaissance. Every conversation, every delivery route, deepened her understanding of community needs, local assets, and quiet corners where a smart investor could claim ground. That night, she drafted her first business plan by candlelight, a holding company to acquire distressed assets, starting with Wycliffe Estates. She worked until her eyes blurred, fueled by determination stronger than caffeine. As the moon climbed high, Isla stepped outside. The air was crisp, dew glittered on the heather. She traced the path to the bakery, then beyond to the mist-shrouded lock. In that silence, She felt reborn. The ash of her old life was still warm, but from it, she would build an empire Evan never imagined. A distant owl hooted. She whispered to the night, "This world is mine now." And as the dark waters rippled under the moon, Isla vowed to rise like dawn, slow, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. The day Vivian invited Isla to her private library felt like stepping into a vault of secrets. A wrought iron gate led to a narrow path, winding through ancient pines. At its end, a stone manor emerged, ivy-clad and brooding. Vivian stood at the threshold, her silver hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes sharp as cut diamonds. "Welcome," she greeted, ushering Isla inside. The library, vast and circular, towered with bookshelves up to a domed ceiling painted with constellations. Leather armchairs clustered around a marble hearth. On the central table lay ledgers, legal briefs, and a mahogany box etched with a family crest. Vivian poured tea into fine china. "Your education begins now," she said, voice both gentle and commanding. "Knowledge without guidance can be dangerous. I'll teach you how to wield it." Isla accepted the cup, inhaling Earl Grey's bergamot. "I'm ready." Vivian nodded and opened the mahogany box. Inside lay a ledger from the 19th century, detailing land acquisitions, trusts, and clandestine partnerships between the Blackstones and Wycliffes. "Your mother's trust," Vivian explained, tracing inked lines with a poised finger. "Dormant for decades. Yet it grants you significant claim." Isla leaned in. "I need to activate it." "First, you must understand every clause," Vivian replied. "Estate law is a battlefield. Contracts can act as cannons or trenches." She slid a thick binder across the table. "We'll start here. Property rights, share dilution, hostile takeover defenses." They spent hours unraveling legalese. Vivian quizzed Isla on shareholder thresholds, poison pills, voting blocks. Isla stumbled initially. Terms like fiduciary duty and paramountcy felt foreign, but under Vivian's patient corrections, she began to speak the language of corporate warfare. At dusk, they broke for dinner, hearty stew and fresh-baked bread. Vivian shared her story. Once a naive heiress who was betrayed by a board she trusted, she'd lost everything until she clawed her way back. "That betrayal forged me," Vivian said, her gaze distant. "I can't spare you hardship, but I can arm you." Isla listened, absorbing every word. She glimpsed in Vivian's tale the mirror of her own. "How did you know who to trust?" she asked. Vivian's eyes softened. "Not everyone, but some alliances are forged in adversity. You'll learn to choose carefully." She tapped a sealed envelope. "Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to someone who can help you build your network." Isla felt a thrill. Alliances, the backbone of power. She realized her world would expand beyond bakeries and dusty ledgers. But as the wind howled outside, rattling window panes, Vivian placed a small brass key on the table. "This opens my vault," she said. "Within, assets and intel on every major player in London. Study them. Know their weaknesses." Isla took the key with reverence. "I won't disappoint you." Vivian smiled, a rare warmth touching her features. "Be cautious. Power reveals the ambitious and the dangerous alike." She extinguished a candle, leaving one flicker in the hearth. As Isla climbed the spiral staircase to her chambers, the manor seemed alive with history and potential. The brass key burned hot in her palm. She opened the door to a room lined with intelligence dossiers. The first document bore the name Wycliffe Estates. Her pulse quickened. In the hush of midnight, Isla Munro stood at the crossroads of knowledge and ambition. The Mentor's Mountain had taught her to see beyond betrayal's sting. Now, equipped with strategy and arcane insight, she would ascend and claim her birthright from the very heights where her enemies once roamed. Morning light filtered through stained-glass windows as Isla descended into Vivian's private boardroom, a circular oak table surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. Charts and intel dossiers lined the walls. Vivian stood at the head, her posture regal. "Today marks the next phase, transformation. You are no longer Isla Munro of rumor and ruin. From this moment, you are Isla 2.0, strategist, negotiator, power broker." Isla settled into a chair, heart pounding. What's first? Vivian tapped a tablet, projecting a mock shareholder meeting scenario. Simulations. She gestured to 3 chairs. You'll face these obstacles: a hostile director, an opportunistic investor, and a media leak. Win their votes, secure control. The director, portrayed by a stern associate, fired objections. Your credentials are a facade. Isla took a breath. Recalling Vivian's lessons on framing and leverage, she presented her mother's legal claim, emphasizing credibility. She offered a share swap that protected minority stakeholders. The director's scowl softened. He grudgingly nodded. Next, the investor, an actor with hawkish eyes, demanded high returns. Isla pivoted, outlining a 5-year growth strategy grounded in sustainable development and diversification into emerging markets. She cited Lockview's rising tourism and her bakery's profitability as proof of concept. The investor leaned forward, intrigued. Could work, he conceded. I'll back you. Finally, the media leak, represented by a young journalist, asked invasive questions. Isla held her ground, acknowledging past mistakes but redirecting focus to her vision, revitalizing estates, creating jobs, restoring community trust. She offered an exclusive interview post-takeover. The journalist lowered his pen. I'll run it. Vivian watched, arms crossed. As the simulation ended, she allowed herself a small smile. Impressive. You've internalized strategy and diplomacy. Isla exhaled, adrenaline still coursing. Thank you. I feel different. Vivian nodded. The world will see not the girl they ridiculed, but a formidable force. Now, let's deepen your expertise. She handed Isla a stack of legal manuals and finance reports. Tonight, you'll study corporate defense tactics, staggered boards, supermajority requirements, golden parachutes. Over the next hours, Isla dove into dense pages, annotating every clause. Each concept felt like a weapon added to her arsenal. Vivian interrupted only to clarify arcane points. As midnight approached, Isla slammed the last book shut. Vivian rose. You've earned this. She led Isla to a secure cabinet and revealed an embossed steel case. Inside lay a golden pen and a sealed dossier. Details on Wycliffe Estates directors, voting breakdowns, and confidential memos on Evan's indecision. With this, you'll make your move. Isla's fingers trembled as she extracted the dossier. Names and figures glowed on the page. Vulnerabilities, debts, alliances ripe for negotiation. This is everything I need. Vivian's gaze was unwavering. Everything and more. But strategy always requires adaptation. Use it wisely. Alone in the expansive boardroom, Isla flipped through the dossier. Each revelation struck like lightning. Evan's cousin Marcus was overleveraged. A key director was nearing retirement. A bond payment loomed next quarter. Isla suppressed a triumphant smile. The chessboard was set. As dawn broke pink over the highlands, Isla stepped onto the balcony overlooking the lock. In one hand, the brass key. In the other, the dossier. Below, mist curled around ancient pines. She felt the weight of her new identity. Isla 2.0. Unrecognizable to those who once saw only a fallen bride. A distant church bell tolled. It seemed to herald her rise. With a final glance at the endless water, Isla whispered to herself, "Let the takeover begin." And as the first rays of sun ignited the horizon, she knew the world would soon witness the full force of her revenge and the transformation they would never forget. Isla sat across from Fergus Grant, the venerable London solicitor, in his wood-paneled chambers. The late afternoon light filtered through heavy drapes, illuminating the motes dancing in the air. A brass nameplate on the desk read, F. Grant & Company, and beneath it, stacks of legal briefs and trust documents fanned out like a silent testament to power. Fergus cleared his throat. "Miss Monroe," he began, sliding a sheaf of papers toward her. "We've confirmed that your mother, Celeste Monroe, was beneficiary to what was once a controlling interest in Wycliffe Estates, 23%, now dormant since her passing." His voice was respectful, but carried a hint of marvel. "The trust has remained untouched for 3 decades. Isla's heart pounded. She'd suspected something, But this revelation felt seismic. Why was it dormant? Fergus tapped a clause. A revocation clause tied it to performance metrics of the core estate, metrics that, until now, could only be met under specific conditions. A formal claim within 5 years after your mother's death. Unclaimed, it defaulted to the residual estate, meaning to Evan Wycliffe and his line. Her breath caught. So Evan legally owns what should have been mine. Until you filed a formal petition, Fergus said gently. But there's more. He leaned forward, voice dropping. A protective provision allows you not only to claim your mother's shares, but to exercise minority veto rights on any major corporate decisions, mergers, leadership changes, asset sales, if you hold just 15% of voting stock. Isla's fingers trembled. A veto right. Her mother's legacy was now a weapon in her hands. She pictured Evan back in that grand hall, the smugness on his face, the spark of cruelty in his eyes. Fury and anticipation warred inside her. What do I need to do? First, Fergus replied, standing and moving to a safe, ornate cabinet. We draft your petition to the High Court. Then, we serve notice to the board of Wycliffe Estates. Once they receive it, they'll have 30 days to respond, though I expect they'll seek to negotiate. Negotiation. Isla allowed herself a small, cold smile. Good. Fergus handed her a thick envelope. These are the certified copies. Tomorrow we file. And if Evan tries to contest it, we'll have precedence on our side. Your mother's documented contributions to the company's founding capital. Isla studied the documents. Her mother's signature in elegant script, ledgers showing her capital injection, correspondence proving her pivotal role in early expansion. The past leapt alive in ink and paper. Thank you, she whispered. Later that evening, back at Lockview, Isla stood by the hearth as Vivian poured whiskey into 2 cut-glass tumblers. Inheritance twist, Vivian mused. Your mother's ghost just walked into the boardroom. Isla lifted her glass in salute. Tomorrow, I reclaim what's mine. Vivian's eyes gleamed. And with that veto, you'll rewrite their rules. But remember, power tests us. Use it wisely. Isla watched the flicker of firelight dance across the whiskey. Doubt fluttered, a whisper that gripping power might cost her humanity. She shook it off. This was justice, not revenge. She needed to strike first, decisively. The next morning, dressed in tailored navy and pearls, Isla arrived at the High Court. Cameras caught her poised silhouette. She knew headlines would blare. Monroe versus Wycliffe, daughter's legal strike. But this time, narrative was hers. She presented the petition with calm authority, signature crisp and unwavering. Moments later, Fergus exited, closing the courthouse doors behind him. He nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. It's filed. They've been served. Isla inhaled the brisk city air, sunlight igniting her resolve. The clock had started ticking. 30 days until Wycliffe Estates had to respond, or cede control. In 30 days, Evan's empire would tremble at the foot of her mother's legacy, and Isla Monroe would stand unshakable. Under a slate sky, Isla drove a nondescript sedan through the gates of Wycliffe Estates, not as Evan's heartbroken ex-fiancée, but as the representative of Monroe Blackstone Holdings. The security guard barely glanced up as she presented her corporate badge. Here, anonymity was her shield. The sprawling grounds, manicured lawns, Italian fountains, and columned porticos felt both familiar and alien. Inside the boardroom, directors gathered, faces etched with curiosity and apprehension. The chairman, Lord Malcolm Wycliffe, presided over the mahogany table with statuesque composure. He regarded Isla through narrow eyes. Miss Monroe, he intoned, voice cool. To what do we owe this unexpected courtesy visit? Isla offered a polite smile. Good morning, Lord Wycliffe. Thank you for accommodating me. I represent Monroe Blackstone Holdings. We're here to discuss strategic partnership opportunities, starting with the minority stake acquisition. Gasps rippled around the room. A hush fell as board members exchanged glances. Evan, seated confidently between his father and uncle, leaned forward. A stake? You mean the shares you legally claim? Isla nodded. Precisely. Following recent filings, our holding company has rights to 23% of Wycliffe Estates, and we seek to convert them into a formal equity position. Lord Wycliffe's jaw tightened. You served notice 30 days ago. We expected litigation, not a board meeting. Islah's tone remained measured. Litigation is costly. I prefer collaboration. I believe our combined vision can revitalize the brand and protect shareholder value, especially considering your company's recent stock volatility. Evan's lips curled. Stock volatility. He tapped a tablet displaying graphs that showed plummeting share prices. Monroe Blackstone would do well to secure its own finances. A senior director, Cecilia March, raised her hand. Miss Monroe, your sudden return and offer have confused many investors. Can you clarify your intentions? Islah turned to Cecilia, nodding. Of course. My vision aligns with Wycliffe Estates' legacy, prestige, quality, and community stewardship. I propose an immediate capital injection of £50 million in exchange for structured equity, along with a seat on the board to oversee sustainable initiatives. Together, we can stabilize the share price, improve market confidence, and open new markets in Asia and Africa. Murmurs filled the room. The chairman steepled his fingers. This is ambitious. Why should we trust you? Islah's gaze locked with Evan's. Because I have nothing left to prove to you personally. I'm here for the long game, for the company my mother helped found. You can call it vengeance or vision. I call it stewardship. Evan's voice was cold. We'll deliberate. You'll receive our decision in writing. As the meeting adjourned, Islah gathered her documents. Outside the room, Evan fell into step. Clever move, he said quietly, playing the gracious partner. Islah looked him in the eyes. I'm no one's pawn. He smirked. We'll see what the board thinks. In the hallway, board members whispered. She's bold. Is this a takeover? Watch your backs. The undercurrent of tension crackled in the polished marble foyer. Back at her temporary offices in Mayfair, Islah and Mia debriefed. Conversions, objections, and nodding alliances. The responses had ranged from cautious interest to thinly veiled hostility. But most importantly, she'd secured a formal discussion of her equity conversion and a board seat. Mia grinned. You shook the lion's den. Islah sipped chamomile tea, mind racing. We hold veto rights and a seat. That's leverage. Next, quietly convert shares, solidify alliances, and prepare for the charity gala. Mia's eyes lit. The black tie auction. Islah nodded. Yes. It's time to remind Evan who truly owns the jewels he flaunts. She tapped her pen against her planner. Phase 2 begins at the benefactor's ball. Under the radar, I'll secure what matters most, the Wycliffe family heirloom. As dusk fell over London, Islah watched the city lights shimmer. Her return had begun, not with fanfare, but with calculated precision. The world believed she was a humbled casualty. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Late into the night, in a discreet Mayfair office, Islah and Magnus Lew, her chief financial officer, reviewed a digital map of London's prime real estate, villas, vineyards, and storefronts previously held by Wycliffe Estates. The glow of multiple screens cast blue light on their focused faces. Magnus pointed to a list. These parcels, Wycliffe Vineyards in Kent, the Bristol Townhouse, the Hammersmith storefront, all distressed or up for renewal. We can acquire them through 3 shell entities. No direct Monroe Blackstone reference. Islah leaned forward. Proceed. Use Argent Nominees Ltd., Midas Equity Partners, and Grosvenor Trust Company. Ensure bids are just above market value to avoid suspicion. Magnus nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. I'll set up the SPVs tonight. We'll close first acquisitions by week's end. As Magnus worked, Islah reflected. Each purchase chipped away at Evan's empire from within, sowing doubt among shareholders. Small moves, seen by none, would converge into seismic change. The next morning, Islah arrived at Vineyard Gate Auctions, discreet in a low-slung sedan. She exited with her assistant, Mia, scanning champagne flutes and designer suits. The event, advertised as a charity fundraiser for rural artisans, attracted investors and socialites alike, many with ties to Wycliffe. Inside, lying on velvet cushions, a lineup of rare vintages and property rights certificates awaited bidders. Isla slipped on designer gloves, a mask concealing half her face. She moved through the crowd, observing Evan in crisp black tie, flanked by his board. He chatted animatedly, unaware that one of the auction monitors flagged 3 bids coming from Argent nominees. Auctioneer's gavel tapped cloth-covered podium. Property lot 23. Leasehold on Wycliffe's Chigwell Vineyard. Opening bid, £200,000. Bidders murmured, paddles rose. A hushed voice echoed, 250,000, Argent nominees. Heads turned. The paddle belonged to a silver-haired gentleman in an understated tux. Isla watched through reflected glass. A rival bid came in. 300,000, Sir Geoffrey Linton. Another nod. Tension crackled. Isla took a breath as her gentleman raised the paddle. 350,000, Argent nominees. Bidders hesitated, eyes narrowing. The gavel fell. Sold to Argent nominees. Evan's brow furrowed. He leaned toward a board member. Who is Argent nominees? He murmured. The board member shrugged. Private shell, apparently. No direct ties. Evan's gaze flicked around the room. He spotted an auction clerk whispering into a headset. Suspicion glinted in his eyes. Moments later, at table 17, Atlantis Tax and Trust congratulated Argent on closing the deed. Isla's masked proxy nodded politely. A small step, but one more foothold in Wycliffe's territory. Back at Mayfair HQ, Magnus updated the ledger. 3 properties acquired, slated for asset consolidation. We're invisible, he said, unsmiling. No one suspects Monroe Blackstone. Isla exhaled. Yet. The following morning, news alerts pinged across her phone. Shell entities snap up Wycliffe assets. Mystery buyer raises eyebrows. Investor forums buzzed with speculation. Share prices ticked upward slightly on rumor of smart capital influx, but analysts warned. What's the end game? Isla tapped her screen. Exactly. That evening, at a private dinner, Isabel Blackstone, Vivian's niece and a respected art dealer, leaned in. You're stirring the pot, she said. Evan's team is investigating those shell companies. Isla smiled, ice cold. Let them look. When they follow the trail, they'll lead right to Monroe Blackstone Holdings. Isabel's eyes widened. Bold. Necessary, Isla replied. She drained her wine. Tomorrow we escalate. Next stop, the charity gala. As London's lights glittered across the Thames, Isla felt the quiet exhilaration of a plan unfolding. Each hidden purchase another thread in the web tightening around Evan's empire. The takeover from the shadows had begun, and no one would see her final strike until it was too late. Under crystal chandeliers and soaring arched ceilings of the Gresham Hall, elite benefactors mingled in tuxedos and ball gowns, laughter echoing among vaulted stone pillars. The annual Wycliffe Charitable Foundation Gala promised opulence, a black tie affair supporting children's education. Yet beneath the glitter, Isla saw opportunity. She stepped from her car in a sleek emerald gown and a delicate Venetian mask, her identity obscured. Mia adjusted the mask and whispered, Remember, bid high, but don't let them suspect you. Isla nodded. Inside, servers passed champagne flutes to a murmuring crowd. At the hall's center, antique samplers and family heirlooms lay displayed. A diamond-encrusted Wycliffe crest brooch, an ivory-handled opera glasses set, and the star, a 24-karat emerald necklace, once owned by Evan's great-grandmother. Tonight, the necklace's proceeds would fund scholarships, but Isla intended it to fund her final coup. Evan, in midnight blue tailcoat, strode to the podium with his mother, Lady Wycliffe, at his side. Cameras flashed as they spoke of legacy and giving back. Isla watched from the back, mind racing. The necklace was lot 12, the prime lot. She would acquire it, then reveal her identity at the final moment. The auction began. Lots 1 to 11 sold with polite applause. Evan scanned the crowd, confident. Then came lot 12. Auctioneer's voice boomed. 24-karat emerald necklace. Estimated opening bid, £1 million. Evan raised his paddle instantly. 1 million. His confident smirk invited counterbids. The crowd leaned in. A hush fell as a paddle shot upward. Bid 1.2 million. Midas Equity Partners. Isla held her breath. Evan's brow furrowed. He glanced sideways. 1.3, Evan Wycliffe. He raised his paddle loftily. The masked figure, Isla's proxy, held steady. 1.5, Midas Equity Partners. The room shifted uneasily. Investors whispered, "Who's Midas?" No clue. Evan's jaw clenched. He raised again. 1.6. Isla's proxy tapped. 1.8, Midas Equity Partners. Silence wrapped the hall. Finally, with a defeated breath, Evan lowered his paddle. Auctioneer's gavel struck. Sold, Midas Equity Partners. Gasps rippled. Lady Wycliffe's hand flew to her chest. Cameras swiveled toward the victor's box. Isla remained hidden behind her mask. Mia shot a quick smile and slipped away. Later, at the gala's end, Evan descended the grand staircase, eyes scanning the throng. He caught sight of the mask in the victor's box, an emerald hue identical to the gown. His steps quickened. He intercepted Mia at a hors d'oeuvre tray. "Who was that buyer?" he demanded, voice low. Mia, feigning innocence, sipped champagne. "I have no idea." They bid fiercely. Evan's eyes narrowed. "Someone's undermining me." He brushed past Mia and descended the stairs, intent on unraveling the mystery. In the VIP lounge, Isla removed her mask and collected the necklace in a velvet box. Her pulse thrummed. The emerald glinted in low light, proof that she could outbid him at his own game. She slipped it into her clutch as Mia approached. "That was flawless," Mia whispered. He looked furious. Isla allowed herself a hint of a smile. "He'll wake up to a nightmare tomorrow." She patted the clutch. Tonight was phase 3. Next, let the boardroom whispers begin. Outside, the valet loaded her car. Evan emerged behind her, breath ragged. "Wait," he called. Isla halted, turning without fear. Her hair spilled over bare shoulders. Her posture was regal. "Are you Midas?" he challenged. His voice trembled, part fury, part awe. "Show your face." Isla smiled, stepping into moonlight. "Consider a preview." She slid into the sedan and closed the door. The engine roared as the car pulled away. Evan stood on the curb, staring at empty street, his heirloom gone, his pride wounded, and a woman he thought destroyed now out of reach. And in that moment, he realized, the hunter had become the prey. The morning headline struck like thunder. Masked buyer snatches Wycliffe's emerald heirloom. Investors flooded the trading floor. Share prices wavered amid speculation. In boardrooms across Mayfair, champagne breakfasts turned to hurried coffee and grim-faced analysts. Word of the charity gala trap had spread, but the masked identity remained unknown. Inside the Wycliffe Estates tower, gleaming glass and steel, Evan paced the executive lounge. His once pristine suit now felt like armor threadbare from overuse. Cecilia March, head of investor relations, approached with a tablet. "Evan," she began quietly, "we've received anonymous emails tonight, whistleblower intel on shell entities acquiring our assets. And now this. The board is nervous." Evan slammed a fist on the table. "Find out who's behind it. I want names, structures, anything. No one undermines me." Cecilia nodded, already tapping away. "I'll have a full report within hours." Meanwhile, at Monroe Blackstone's discreet Mayfair offices, Isla convened her inner circle, Magnus, Mia, and Isabel Blackstone. On the wall screen gleamed a dashboard of acquisitions, financial reports, and media sentiment analysis, all trending in her favor. Magnus pointed to a graph. Public confidence in Wycliffe is tanking. Meanwhile, Monroe Blackstone assets are stabilizing. He sipped coffee. Shareholders are asking questions. Who is this aggressive new player? Isla leaned in. Exactly. Now, let's fan those whispers. She tapped the screen. Release the boardroom letters. Mia handed out sealed envelopes, bound with Monroe Blackstone letterhead. The memo inside detailed a strategic roadmap, suggesting diversification into emerging markets and enhancement of community programs. An explicit critique of Wycliffe's stale leadership. Isabel smirked. This will get them talking. That afternoon, envelopes arrived at the Wycliffe board members' desks. Each found the same insider analysis, anonymous but impeccably sourced. Comments: company underexposed in key markets. Board lacks vision. Consider alliance or risk collapse. Panic rippled through the board. White-haired directors muttered behind closed doors. The board secretary called an emergency meeting. Word reached Evan via Cecilia. He stormed into the boardroom mid-session, interrupting a heated debate. "Who sent these?" he demanded. "This is sabotage." A junior director, Thomas Reed, swallowed. "They came from a corporate account registered offshore, Grosvenor Trust Company. No obvious ties to Monroe Blackstone or Wycliffe." Evan's face drained. He referenced the auction acquisitions. "You're telling me it's the same shell networks?" Thomas nodded. "All properties match the ones acquired by those entities." Silence fell. Then a seasoned director, Lydia Hayward, spoke. "This is a coordinated takeover. We're being outmaneuvered by someone with deep pockets and insider knowledge." Evan's voice wavered. "But who?" Back at Monroe Blackstone, Isla watched the public chatter. Influencer tweets: "Isla Monroe is a genius." Financial pundits: "Is this the new face of corporate revenge?" Magnus leaned back. "They're eating it up." Isla closed her eyes. "Tonight we escalate again. We'll send them an invitation." She drafted a sleek digital invite to Wycliffe's board. A collaboration summit, hosted by Monroe Blackstone. An olive branch laced with poison. In the fine print, only select directors, no Evan. And an agenda, new leadership proposals. Mia raised an eyebrow. "No Evan." Isla's lips curved. "He'll see it as a chance to negotiate. He won't suspect a trap." As dusk settled over London, Evan scanned his inbox and found it. The invitation. He opened it, reading the bold header. Monroe Blackstone Holdings, Invitation to Strategic Summit. His pulse quickened, confusion, anticipation, dread. The sender address? Isla Monroe. He muttered to himself, voice edged with disbelief. She's calling the shots now. Across town, Isla watched from her penthouse window as the city lights flickered on. Tomorrow's summit would mark the crescendo of her takeover. The whispers at the top had begun, and soon, every name at Wycliffe's table would tremble at the power she wielded. In the silent night, a single thought echoed in Isla's mind. Let the reckoning come. At dawn, London's financial district awoke to a new terror. Wycliffe estates teetering on the brink of default. A mandatory bond payment, £150 million, had matured overnight. Credit agencies downgraded the company's rating. Creditors demanded immediate collateral. In the cavernous boardroom on the 42nd floor, Evan Wycliffe stared at his phone in disbelief. Graphs on the screens behind him showed the share price plummeting by 12% as worried investors pulled out. "Sir, we need liquidity," urged Cecilia March, head of investor relations, her tone tight. "Our cash reserves can't cover both the bond and operating costs." Evan ran a hand through his hair. "Raise debt? Sell assets? Anything." His voice echoed off marble walls. Lord Malcolm Wycliffe, patriarch and chairman, sat impassive, face etched with concern. "You gambled our stability away," he said quietly. "Now fix it." Outside the boardroom, two crisis teams assembled. One to negotiate with creditors, the other to spin the narrative in the press. Thomas Reed, junior director, monitored live feeds. "Coverage is brutal," he reported. Headlines: Wycliffe Empire in freefall. Social media mocking the royal debacle. In a smoke-filled side office, Evan and Magnus Liu, Isla's CFO, secretly feeding her intel, clashed. Magnus feigned loyalty. "You should consider strategic divestment," he suggested calmly. "Unload underperforming units at market value." Evan's eyes narrowed. "Who asked for advice?" he snapped. Magnus stubbed out his cigar. "Just saying, sir." "Enough." Evan's possessive glare froze Magnus. Outside, creditors circled like sharks. Banks threatened foreclosure on properties Isla had already acquired through Argent nominees and Midas equity partners. Each unexpected bid had siphoned liquidity from Wycliffe's coffers. The company was hemorrhaging funds, and no one but Isla knew why. Back in Mayfair, Isla surveyed live bond auction data with Mia. They're forced sellers, Mia noted. Portfolio managers unloading Wycliffe debt at rock-bottom prices. Isla's lips curved into a measured smile. Perfect. We pick it up cheap. She tapped her tablet. Monroe Blackstone Holdings wired £50 million to buy distressed bonds. Each acquisition shifted leverage away from Wycliffe and into her hands. Within hours, Monroe Blackstone held controlling interest in Wycliffe's short-term debt. In the Wycliffe boardroom, creditors reconvened. We'll convert debt to equity, they declared. 20% stake, effective immediately. Lord Malcolm's hand trembled on the table. Evan watched, pale, as his family's company ceded control without his consent. Votes unanimous, said the lead creditor. Effective now. Evan's world tilted. As ink dried on conversion documents, Montgomery solicitors delivered a summons. Monroe Blackstone claimed majority interest and demanded board seats. The board uprose in stunned silence. Evan stood rooted, betrayed by the very debt he'd once deemed trivial. Later, in a private lounge, Lord Malcolm faced Evan. Your recklessness cost us everything, literally. Evan's jaw clenched. She's playing a different game. Outside, across town, Isla closed her laptop. Debt collapse complete, she murmured. Next, the will he forgot. Mia glanced up, eyebrows raised. Ready for Chapter 17? Isla rose, eyes alight with resolve. Let's finish this. And somewhere in Wycliffe Towers, Evan realized. His fortress had crumbled from within, and the architect of its undoing stood beyond his reach. Under the sterling chandeliers of St. James's Hall, shareholders gathered for an emergency special meeting. Rumors swirled. Monroe Blackstone had seized majority control. As guests settled in velvet seats, a hush fell when Lord Malcolm Wycliffe took the podium, face drawn. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we face unprecedented circumstances. Isla entered unnoticed in the back row, dressed in charcoal gray suit, hair pinned back. She checked her phone. 32% voting shares controlled by Monroe Blackstone, another 10% by allied hedge funds. She rose and moved toward an aisle. Evan spotted her silhouette and froze, disbelief etched on his face. The chairman introduced motions. First, to acknowledge the debt-to-equity conversion. Second, to elect 2 new board members. Nominees, Miss Isla Monroe and Mr. Magnus Liu of Monroe Blackstone Holdings. A ripple of shock circled the hall. Cameras swung toward Isla as her name echoed off gilded walls. Evan slumped into his seat. Cecilia's gasp resounded. Thomas Reed's phone trembled in his hand. Only Vivian Blackstone, watching discreetly via proxy presentation, smiled with quiet pride. When floor votes commenced, Isla took the podium. Her calm voice carried clear conviction. Thank you, directors and shareholders. My mother's trust established my rightful claim. What was dormant for decades now serves the company's future. I pledge to protect legacy and community. She paused, then with ceremonious flourish, unveiled an embossed leather portfolio. Last will and testament of Celeste Monroe. Gasps rose. Inside, pages detailed Celeste's foundational share contributions and a clause granting Isla veto power over any director dismissal or asset transfer. The audience leaned in as she read key passages. Should the primary line fail to uphold the company's integrity, the beneficiary may exercise protective veto rights. Evan's face drained color. He rose to object, but found his voice lodged in his throat. Isla continued. Under these provisions, I not only claim existing shares, but reserve the right to veto any retaliatory decisions. You cannot sideline me. She closed the will reverently. This document validates the merger of Monroe Blackstone and Wycliffe estates into a stronger whole. In silence, the chairman rapped his gavel. All in favor of confirming Miss Monroe's appointment and her protective rights, signify by saying aye. Aye, chorused a majority, more than 60%. Even some of Evan's cousins, persuaded by Magnus' private assurances, voiced their support. Evan slumped as the second vote passed. His mother's testament had undone his legacy. After the meeting, Investors spilled into the foyer. Reporters clamored. "Miss Monroe, your mother's will. How did you uncover it?" Isla answered with poised brevity. "Research and perseverance. Justice demands action." Her words ignited applause. In a quiet alcove, Evan confronted her. "You stole my family's heritage." Isla's eyes were steel. "I reclaimed what was mine. You lost everything when you gambled on my humiliation." He shook with fury. "You'll regret this." Isla turned away, voice cool. "Regret is a commodity you can't afford." Her heels echoed as she walked out. Minutes later, Luna Investments, a rival firm, released a statement praising Monroe Blackstone's decisive leadership. Shares ticked up. Market confidence, once shattered, found footing. That evening, at Vivian's mountain retreat, Isla toasted with champagne. Today, the will he forgot became his downfall. Vivian clinked glasses. He'll never forget this moment. Isla watched the moonlight dance on her glass. But as long as Evan lives, he'll seek revenge. And Isla knew the next chapter would demand even greater strategy. And perhaps mercy she wasn't sure she could afford. A week later, Isla orchestrated a private screening for Wycliffe's top stakeholders at the Regal Cinema Club, an intimate art house venue in Mayfair. Invitations branded with Monroe Blackstone's crest arrived, a reflection on legacy and leadership. Among the attendees, major investors, board members, and press insiders. Evan received his invite at Prestige Towers, opening it with trembling fingers. On the opulent velvet seats, whispers filled the air. Moments before showtime, the lights dimmed and a hush descended. Magnus Liu took the stage, voice resonant. "Tonight we revisit a pivotal moment, not for sensationalism, but as a case study in leadership failure and the human cost of corporate arrogance." The screen flickered to life. First, the rehearsal footage from the engagement party. Isla in a pristine gown, Evan smiling into the camera, guests raising champagne glasses. Then, the microphone incident. Evan's smirk as he tore the engagement apart. The auditorium gasped collectively at the replay of Isla's tears, each sob magnified by the surround sound. Silence pressed heavy as the moment ended. A black frame reading Betrayal Undone. Magnus paused the film. "Notice how authority is wielded and abused." He directed his gaze toward Evan, seated stiff as a statue. Investors shifted in their seats. Public humiliation creates intangible liabilities, brand erosion, investor distrust, and irreparable harm to reputation. A montage followed, news clips of trending hashtags, investors pulling back funds, credit ratings tanking. The evidence was undeniable. Magnus clicked a remote. The screen split, showing Isla's rapid rise, from obscurity to boardroom power. Graphs illustrated Wycliffe's decline and Monroe Blackstone's stability. Whispers grew into murmurs. "This is ruthless." A masterful rebuttal. She turned pain into strategy. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. When the lights brightened, Isla ascended the dais. Her presence was commanding in a tailored ivory jacket. "We presented this not to shame, but to learn," she began. "Every corporation should respect human dignity. Leadership demands integrity. Today, we redefine governance." Her words landed like gavel strikes. A senior investor, Margaret Haldane, stood. "Miss Monroe, your reconciliation of personal pain and professional acumen is extraordinary." She nodded in approval. Evan rose, voice clipped. "This was a private moment. You had no right." Isla raised a hand, silencing him. It became public domain. "I'm simply reframing its significance." She locked eyes with him. "Next time you consider abusing power, remember, every action has consequences." A board member, Julian Price, approached. "I'd like to discuss adopting your leadership framework." Investors formed a line. Each sought her insight. Evan watched as his own allies flocked to Isla's side. Later, in the empty lobby, Cecilia offered Isla a handshake. "You've rattled the cage, and it's not so easy to ignore you now." Isla accepted. That was the point. She turned to the exits, flanked by Mia. Outside, a cluster of paparazzi blazed cameras into the night. Flashbulbs lit her path. Before stepping into the waiting car, Isla glanced back. On the marquee, WER, broken engagement replayed. The world saw her broken moment, and then her triumph. In the electric buzz of the city, Isla Monroe planted a seed. Personal history could become corporate strategy. And as she disappeared into the Mayfair haze, she whispered, "Let's see how he responds." The annual Wycliffe Estates shareholder gala took place in a glass-walled banquet hall overlooking Hyde Park. Crystal droplets refracted candlelight, and a string quartet provided lilting accompaniment. Despite the elegant trappings, tension gripped every table. A sign at the entrance read, "Embracing change." Investors murmured, "Change by whom?" Isla arrived in midnight blue, accompanied by Magnus and Isabel. Mia ushered her to a reserved table at the center, directly opposite Evan's party. He stood in tailored black, flanked by cousins and advisors, their smiles forced. Evan spotted Isla's arrival and froze. The air crackled. When the master of ceremonies announced dinner, Isla rose and tapped her glass. A hush fell. She approached the mic at the dais. Each step measured. Cameras pivoted. Evan watched, pulse pounding. "Esteemed guests," Isla began, voice steady. "Tonight, we honor tradition and herald transformation." She gestured to the assembled board. Change is inevitable when legacy falters. She paused, letting the words sink in. Evan's jaw clenched. "What's your angle?" he hissed to a cousin. The cousin shrugged. Isla continued. "Wycliffe Estates once stood as paragon of excellence. But under current leadership, share value lost 15% last quarter, community trust eroded, debt crises crippled operations." She clicked a remote. Behind her, slides displayed stark figures, losses, downgrades, public backlash. Gasps punctuated the hall. "I propose a leadership restructuring." She turned to the board. "Lord Malcolm, may I present Mr. Magnus Lew as interim CEO?" Magnus stood, nodding with modest pride. Evan's expression twisted, betrayal mirrored in his eyes. Before anyone could object, Isla advanced. "And I accept the role of chairman." Further shock rippled. Cameras captured Evan's pale reflection in the window panes. Whispers erupted. "She's taking control." Evan leapt to his feet. "You can't, this is my family." Isla met him coolly. "Family is not blood alone, it's legacy. And I intend to protect what my mother helped build." She raised her hand. "All in favor of this motion, please stand." Board members shuffled, some rising warily, others with conviction. Evan's allies looked torn. Lord Malcolm, face hard, rose finally and declared, "The motion passes." Evan's legs buckled. He sank into a chair, stunned. Reporters scribbled furiously. Investors conferred excitedly. Isla's decisive maneuver had seized the reins. As applause echoed, Isla approached Evan. He looked up, eyes haunted. "You've destroyed me," he whispered. Isla's gaze softened fractionally. "I freed this company from weakness." She placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. "This isn't personal. It's survival." Evan studied her, pain and awe mingling in his gaze. "What will you do with me?" She smiled, steel glimmering beneath warmth. "Find a role that serves the new vision, if you can earn it." Then, addressing the hall, she proclaimed, "Here's to Wycliffe Estates, reborn." As she left the dais, the crowd rose in ovation. Flashbulbs illuminated her path. Evan remained seated, a king dethroned in his own court. Back at her table, Magnus offered Isla a glass of champagne. She took it and toasted quietly. "To new beginnings." Mia and Isabel clinked glasses. Outside, the night air carried distant sirens. Inside, a dynasty shifted with the turn of a single vote. For Evan Wycliffe, the face-to-face confrontation spelled the end of his reign. For Isla Monroe, it was the triumphant dawn of her empire. The following morning, media outlets exploded with headlines. "Monroe seizes Wycliffe crown." News tickers replayed last night's gala takeover. Share prices surged 10% on the promise of stable leadership. Investors called trading desks in celebration. In boardrooms across the country, conversations buzzed. Who is Isla Monroe? Can she save the brand? Is this the new model for corporate revival? In the revamped Wycliffe boardroom, renamed Monroe Wycliffe Chambers, Isla convened a historic press conference. A semicircular dais, with mahogany inlay, bore both family crests. Behind her stood Magnus, Vivian, via video link, and Lord Malcolm, now honorary advisor. Reporters jammed the floor space, recorders and cameras trained on Isla like solar eclipses. She stepped forward, voice resonant. "Good morning. Yesterday marked a pivotal shift. We presented evidence of mismanagement and betrayal, compiled from documents, footage, and financial records." She gestured to a large screen. "Now you will see why our actions were necessary." The screen lit up with a rapid montage. The engagement party humiliation, the debt collapse graphs, the wills clauses, the massed auction bids, all in swift succession. Gasps rose in the audience as cameras panned from stunned journalists to shareholders blinking in disbelief. Isla allowed the montage to settle. Then she displayed a sealed envelope stamped "Final Clause." She held it aloft. "You've seen the evidence that brought us here. Now, the decisive factor lies within this clause, once executed." Her voice dropped. "It grants us not only majority control, but irrevocably transfers board appointment power to Monroe Blackstone for 5 years." A ripple of astonishment ran through the crowd. Evan stood at the back, pale as chalk, tears glinting in his eyes. His mother placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. The press scribbled, "Tenure clause stuns everyone. Isla consolidates power. No reversal possible." Isla broke the seal and read aloud. "Upon legal claim of beneficiary shares, Monroe Blackstone Holdings shall have exclusive right to appoint or remove any board member without vote for a period of 5 years." The final word echoed in silence. Reporters exchanged frantic glances. Social media feeds ignited. Hashtag Monroe Clause. Hashtag Wycliffe Reborn. Someone shouted, "How will you use that power?" Isla's smile was serene. "To rebuild brands, protect communities, and ensure transparency. This power is a responsibility I accept." She folded the paper. "We will restore Wycliffe Estates to global prominence, with integrity at its core." At that moment, a shareholder raised a hand. "Miss Monroe, what of Evan Wycliffe's role?" Isla's eyes flicked to Evan. The room held its breath. She inclined her head. "He will serve as ambassador for philanthropic initiatives, honoring his family's heritage. But operational leadership rests with those committed to progress." Evan swallowed hard, then straightened. He met her gaze and gave a small, respectful nod. The crowd murmured approval. As the press conference ended, flashes popped like fireworks. Isla descended from the dais, her silhouette framed by reporters and advisors. In a private hallway, Evan intercepted her. "Thank you," he whispered, voice raw, "for saving what mattered." Isla placed a hand on his arm. "I did what I had to do." She paused. "Now, watch me transform this empire." They parted ways as the cameras faded. Outside, London's skyline shimmered under morning sun. Below, a city awakened to a new dynasty, one forged in betrayal, reclaimed by legacy, and cemented by a single, irrevocable clause. In the silent aftermath, one thought prevailed. History would remember Isla Monroe as the architect of Wycliffe's greatest rebirth. And as the crowd dispersed, every eye followed her path, eager for the next chapter in her legend. Morning light filtered through the ornate latticework of Wycliffe Estate's great hall as the same crowd that witnessed the dramatic transfer of power gathered for a private reception. Lady Wycliffe, whose earlier denunciations of Isla had echoed through these marble corridors, now approached the woman she once scorned, her steps hesitant yet resolute. Investors, directors, and staff paused, sensing the significance of this moment. Isla stood poised, her tailored suit immaculate, mask of composure shielding the tumult within. As Lady Wycliffe drew near, the hush deepened. Drawing a steady breath, she began, voice trembling with sincerity. "Isla Monroe, I was wrong to dismiss you as an interloper. I misjudged your character and your vision." Her eyes glistened with remorse. "You have reclaimed not only your rightful inheritance, but your leadership has rescued our legacy from the brink of collapse." A soft murmur rippled through the assembled onlookers. Lady Wycliffe extended her hand. Please accept my deepest apologies for the pain and humiliation you endured. You elevated this company and our family name. For that, I owe you my gratitude and respect. Isla paused, heart echoing in her chest. The woman before her was not simply a former adversary, but the matriarch of an empire. Extending her own hand, she replied with poised grace, "Your words mean more than restitution. Together, we can honor the spirit of both our families and build a stronger future." As their hands met, the great hall exhaled. Cameras clicked, whispers turned to cheers. Investors traded looks of relief and admiration. Lady Wycliffe's apology became a symbol of unity rather than division, signaling that the era of bitterness had given way to collaborative leadership for Wycliffe Estates. Later that evening, over tea and letters, they discussed initiatives to restore community trust and philanthropic outreach across estates. After Lady Wycliffe's apology, all eyes turned to Evan for his own reckoning. At midday, the estate's sunlit courtyard hosted a press conference beneath white canopies. Rows of cameras, reporters, and shareholders gathered before a speaker's podium draped in Wycliffe and Monroe Blackstone banners. Evan emerged in a charcoal suit, tie slightly askew, and faced the crowd with visible anxiety. He cleared his throat and began. Isla Monroe, members of the board, stakeholders, today I stand before you humbled by my actions and remorseful for the pain I caused. My arrogance led me to disgrace the woman I once promised to cherish. He paused, swallowing hard as he glanced toward Isla, seated among the directors, her expression inscrutable. I ask for your forgiveness, he said, extending a trembling hand. The assembled audience held its breath as cameras zoomed in. Social media streams exploded with live commentary. Reporters scribbled notes, sensing a pivotal moment. Isla remained perfectly still, silhouette defined against marble columns. After a tense beat, she rose with smooth grace. Silence enveloped the courtyard. Facing Evan, she spoke in a clear, measured tone. Mr. Wycliffe, your apology acknowledges your failure, but words alone cannot rebuild trust or heal the humiliation inflicted in public view. Leadership demands accountability and sustained action, not gestures under flashing lights. I cannot accept an apology when damage has been irrevocably done. A murmur of approval swept through shareholders. Reporters nodded, updating headlines. Evan's face drained of color as hope drained alongside it. Cameras captured his stunned reaction. Social media erupted with #NoForgiveness trending worldwide. Isla turned and walked away, her posture unshakable. In that moment, the world learned that a public apology could be refused, and that true leadership is proven by integrity, not by pleading for mercy. Under crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes of the grand ballroom, Wycliffe Estates board convened its first meeting under Monroe Blackstone's majority control. Wallace green wool suits and polished Oxfords lined the long mahogany table. At its head sat Isla Monroe, her presence commanding. Beside her were Magnus Lew and Lady Wycliffe, recast now as honorary advisor. Cameras stood at the periphery, recording every gesture. Lord Malcolm Wycliffe entered, face solemn. The hush deepened as he joined the table. Isla stood and addressed the directors. We are here to formalize the transfer of operational leadership. Effective immediately, Monroe Blackstone Holdings holds decision-making authority for the next 5 years. She gestured to a stack of sealed documents. These papers confirm the transfer of voting rights, board appointment powers, and executive oversight previously held by the Wycliffe line. A murmur of assent followed as role assignments were announced. Magnus would serve as interim CEO, charged with restructuring and debt alleviation. Lady Wycliffe would oversee philanthropic initiatives, restoring community trust. Isla would assume the title of chairman and direct long-term strategy. Each new role forged a balance between tradition and innovation. Evan, present but unmoved, rose to speak. His voice was low but firm. Will this transfer remain irrevocable? He asked. Isla met his gaze. The clause is explicit. For 5 years, Monroe Blackstone exercises these powers. After that, the board may reevaluate under our stewardship. Evan nodded, resignation flitting across his features. Documents were signed in rapid succession. Pens scratched contracts, seals stamped ledgers. As the final signature landed, a symbolic gavel tapped. Cameras flashed. Reporters crowded the doors. Shareholders exhaled in relief, sensing stability at last. When the meeting adjourned, Isla descended from the dais to applause. Outside, London buzzed with news of a peaceful but decisive power transfer. The era of Wycliffe Estates was reborn, and its future now glowed under Isla Munro's steady hand. The morning after the transfer meeting, the Wycliffe family home felt quieter than ever. Portraits of ancestors lined the entrance hall, watchful eyes observing the changing of the guard. Isla arrived for her first solo tour as chairman, determination in each step. In the drawing room where less than a month ago Evan had humiliated her, she now paused before the grand fireplace. Hands clasped. Memories flickered. Evan's mocking laughter, the hush that followed, her dismissal from these rooms. Now the fire's glow felt warmer under her authority. She ran a finger along the carved mantle, reclaiming personal history intertwined with corporate legacy. "Our family story continues," she murmured, as though speaking to those ancestors. She moved on to the library, selecting volumes on governance and restoration. As she arranged them on display, board member Cecilia March entered quietly. "The renovation plans look promising," Cecilia said, gesturing to fresh blueprints. "Community centers, scholarship funds, sustainable vineyards." Isla nodded without looking back. "I want action by quarter's end. No excuses." Cecilia bowed and left. Isla exhaled, steel and mercy balanced. She made her way upstairs to the solarium, a glass pavilion overlooking the rose gardens. Sunlight danced on polished floors. At the center sat a single chair, the one Evan once occupied. Isla settled into it, cresting her shoulders. The roses beyond bloomed in defiance of autumn chill, symbols of resilience. Her phone buzzed with messages from Vivian. Congratulations, updates, strategy notes. Isla responded with brief encouragement before silencing the device. No more distractions. As the sun dipped low, she descended the grand staircase. Standing at the bottom, she allowed herself a moment of introspection. Evan was somewhere behind her now, his ambition sidelined. She would offer him a path forward, but only if he proved himself worthy. With steady steps, Isla crossed the marble foyer and walked out the front doors. Behind her, the Wycliffe legacy rested in capable hands. Ahead lay new challenges, and no looking back. Dusk fell across the sprawling vineyards of Wycliffe Estates as Isla stood on the balcony of the newly restored manor, the horizon painted gold and rose. Beneath her, lantern-lit paths wound through ripening grapes. The estate, once on the brink, now thrummed with renewed energy. Workers harvesting fruit, students arriving for scholarship ceremonies, guests touring restored historic halls. Isla inhaled deeply, the air scented with earth and promise. In her pocket lay the final corporate charter, her signature sealing Munro Blackstone's stewardship for years to come. No sooner had she affixed her name than a news alert pinged. Global markets hailed Wycliffe's turnaround, share prices soared, and hashtag Isla Takes Flight trended worldwide. She allowed herself a rare smile, the weight of betrayal and battle finally lifting. Behind her, footsteps approached. Vivian Blackstone emerged, her silver hair glowing in the lantern light. "You've built something extraordinary," she said quietly. "This estate will flourish." Isla glanced back at the manor. "We did more than survive. We thrived." She turned to Vivian. "Thank you for guidance, for belief. I never imagined this future." Vivian smiled. "You always had it within you. I merely unlocked it." She embraced Isla, proud and affectionate. As the stars emerged overhead, Isla stepped forward to address a small gathering of staff and trustees. Her voice rang clear. "Tonight, we celebrate resilience, unity, and vision. Know that under this leadership, Wycliffe Estates honors its past while forging a sustainable, compassionate future." Applause rippled through the courtyard. Leaving the podium, Isla paused at the edge of the terrace. Below, the Gresham oak, the estate's ancient symbol of endurance, stood tall. She laid a single hand on its trunk. "We grow stronger every season," she whispered. Turning away, Isla Monroe walked back toward the manor, every step confident. Behind her, lanterns flickered and laughter carried on the breeze. Ahead lay possibilities she never dared dream, and she never looked back. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.